Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I'm really, really excited for today's episode. I'm kind of like gone down the rabbit hole and I'm going to say slightly stalking Dr. Sideroff before I met him this morning or this afternoon. It's technically the afternoon now. But before I introduce my guest, I'm going to talk about the fact that I have a 14-year-old graduating 8th grade and how sad this is for me and how quickly it's gone by. I have a 10-year-old too, but just the 14-year-old, my first, and then realizing I only have like 4 more years with her and then she goes off to high school. And it's just hard. It's a hard thing for a parent and a mother and just in general, like how quickly life goes and how quickly the period of time that we have as a parent where they actually live in our house and are with us. And everybody warned me when I had babies, oh, it goes so fast. It goes so fast. And they weren't kidding. So I will say that. She also got an electric bike for her graduation, which I said over my dead body, would I ever get my kid an electric bike? We live at the beach. And I caved. And so now I'm a wreck every time she's out on her bike thinking the worst of what's going to happen. And because I'm catastrophize everything, but I don't know. I'm proud of her. I know that I can't be a helicopter parent. She's going off to high school. It's just a hard thing. So moms, dads, whoever's listening, tell me your stories about how you got over this period. I really know that when it's time for her to go to high school or get out of high school and go to college, I'm going to be that parent that probably follows her and goes and does laundry and embarrasses her at all times. So anyways, Dr. Sideroff, any thoughts on what I just said? Do you have kids?
I have children and I have 5 grandchildren. So I understand there's always a sense of loss as they grow older and leave the house. Mine are living in other cities, so that's difficult as well. And it does relate to resilience in that the goal always is to be in the present moment in the best possible way. That's always my goal. And so it doesn't serve me to feel bad about something. I want to get over the bad feelings so I could sit within the positive, good feelings. So I don't waste time on feelings, emotions that are not going to lead anywhere. It's a training.
I need training and I need to read the book. And I'm glad I'm talking to you today because I needed this. I was in therapy yesterday and I talked about all of this stuff. And I'm a big believer in therapy and doing all this stuff, but I love what you just said. And I think people need to live in the moment, right? We don't. We're always living in tomorrow. And I have a big issue with always living for tomorrow, never living in the moment because I'm constantly worried about what's next. So I can't wait to introduce you right now and talk to you on this episode.
We've all been put here for a reason, and we all deserve acceptance.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.
I'm a trauma survivor from a really young age, and I have been diagnosed with complex PTSD in the past few years. I've been surrounded by death and abuse much of my life. I've been dragged through the mud and have been to the point of not wanting to go on anymore. Through my interviews with other survivors, I've learned that there is a way out. From recovering to surviving and thriving, we all have the strength to come out the other side.
You are listening to Judging Meghan.
Dr. Stephen Sideroff is a PhD, an internationally recognized psychologist, executive and medical consultant, and expert in resilience, longevity, optimal performance, addiction, neurofeedback, and mental health. He's done research and is an associate professor of psychiatry and biobehavioral sciences and rheumatology at UCLA's Geffen School of Medicine. He was the founder and former clinical director of Stress Strategies program at UCLA Santa Monica Hospital and former clinical director of Moonview Treatment and Optimal Performance Center. He has helped establish innovative training and treatment approaches in optimal functioning, mind-body medicine in the US, China, and Europe, and hosted summits in longevity, resilience, and leadership. His new book is The 9 Pillars of Resilience: The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increase Vitality. Everybody, welcome Dr. Sideroff. I am so sorry I butchered that. I was obviously reading it and stumbling as I read because my glasses were falling off my head. Here we go, already talking about glasses. Welcome to the podcast. I'm sorry I butchered some of that.
That's quite all right. I'm happy to be here. And we all make mistakes, and we have to accept that.
I mean, it's part of life. I could go backwards and spend 5 more minutes butchering it again if you want me to, but I don't think I want to put you through that because that's part of life.
Let's
We all
move
mess
on.
up, like you just said. So I always start the podcast with asking you the question of telling myself and my audience, my listeners, a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
So I started my life in Bronx, New York, and left there at 16 to go off to college and then to graduate school. Then I came out to California. The first time I was doing a postdoctoral fellowship in psychobiology at the University of California at Irvine. Then I moved completely across the country to take a position at McGill University in Montreal. And I lasted 3 years there. The city is great. The university was great, but I could only take the winters there for about 3 years and came back to UCLA. And when I came back to UCLA, I switched from brain research into clinical work because I wanted to have hands-on with people. I wanted to encounter people and learn from those experiences and be able to ask the subjects I was working with what they were feeling. I couldn't do that with the animals in my research. And so very early on, I realized that one of the major factors in all of our lives that makes the biggest difference is stress and how we deal with stress. And no matter who you are, what's going on, as soon as you start adding stress and have difficulties with it, your coping abilities begin to fall by the wayside. It strains your ability to cope. And so that's the area that I wanted to focus in on because it was so important in all of our lives. But then I quickly realized that people actually have resistance to dealing with stress. And so that took me down a path of all the reasons why we resist dealing with stress. And that was all very, very important work that led me to establish a model of optimal functioning of resilience that's in my book today. And I've distilled all the things that impact us that have to do with how well we function down into these 9 pillars. And then my book lays them out. But we all struggle with dealing with stress. And part of it is because stress is a necessary ingredient in life. Stress and our stress response literally is what helps us perform at our best, helps us focus, helps us set goals, helps motivate us. In fact, and here's an interesting thing, if you think about all the successes you've had in your life, I guarantee that all or most have been associated with stress. Think about that.
That's true.
You know, an important meeting, a test, a presentation, all of the opportunities for success in our lives are usually accompanied by stress. So what happens in our brains as a result of that? We're putting these two in our lives together, stress and success. One of my early mentors Donald Hebb, one of the pioneers in neuroscience, coined the phrase neurons that fire together, wire together. And so think of that. Our brains are wired to literally to seek out stress because it's always, all of our successes have always been paired with that. And so it's important in our work in my work to help people realize that stress and your stress response can be a tool, but there's a window of optimal levels of stress. And you want to be in that window for best performance and best health. But most of us overshoot that. Most of us think, well, if stress is good, more stress is better. Variations of that tune, so to speak. And so most of the people in our society, in our lives that we encounter, as well as ourselves, push beyond that optimal window into the territory in which both performance and health decrease. And so this is the main struggle in the world today, in the United States today, in Western culture today, is all the consequences of this dysregulation between how much stress we experience and the breakdown of our health and our performance.
Okay. So interesting. And it's really weird how sometimes I have people on at the exact moment. I'm very spiritual, Dr. Sideroff. So I want you to know that like I really believe in like things happening when that's just me. Like you're supposed to meet somebody and talk to somebody at that exact moment when you're supposed to. So yesterday,
I can agree.
I'm sorry.
I said I can agree.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page. Yesterday I had a therapy appointment. I'm very open, by the way. You should know, like I probably spill my guts way too much and people know everything about me, but I'm an open book that way. So I was in therapy yesterday and I've been trying really hard to like cut back on my stress because like you just said, what has made, and it's interesting you say this, what has made me successful in my life is based on stress. So like I was a very successful salesperson. I was constantly stressed. I was constantly up at night worrying about like, cause I was a number, right? So like if something canceled, it was the next month. I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? How am I going to be a mom? How am I going to do this? How am I going to get my kids to school on time? How am I going to do this? It's like constant stress. And something that my therapist brought up yesterday, which I thought was really interesting, and I had never heard this before. So I'm making this about me because that's my favorite thing to talk about. And I'm joking, but I'm not. She brought up the fact that I was diagnosed as a kid with ADHD. Back then, it was just ADD. Okay. They didn't add the ADHD. And I was only diagnosed early because I couldn't figure out why I couldn't study and I was distracted. And I had lost my dad as a kid to cancer. And I said to her, why am I like this? Why am I always so stressed out? Why am I yelling at my kids? Why am I yelling all the time? Why am I so angry? And she said, well, a lot of times if you're neurodivergent, which I am because I was diagnosed with ADHD, I also have complex PTSD. Your brain doesn't really know how to manage the stress. And what happens if you don't express it and you hold it all in, it's going to make you sick. So I'm going to ask you about myself and what you think about that, because I think that's a really interesting point. And I'm sure there's a lot of my listeners that probably struggle with the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So one of the problems that we all face is that we have this tremendous ability to adapt to our environment. Mm-hmm. As children, we do an amazing job of adapting to our environment, but we are adapting and we are dependent. And so we are working very hard to stay in good relation with our primary caregivers, those people who we're dependent on.
Yeah.
And so rather than going out and adapting to the entire world and being able to handle what's going on in the world, we adapt to our primary caregivers. We adapt to the lessons of our mother and our father or whoever else our primary caregivers are. But then our adaptation freezes to that environment. In other words, we learn those lessons really well. For example, we learn perhaps that our mother or father might get angry at us very easily if we do A, B, or C. So then we get nervous in our lives anytime someone may be showing similar tendencies to one of our parents. In other words, we approach the world as an adult based on those lessons of childhood, and that's what gets most of us into trouble, because those are not appropriate lessons for optimal functioning. They're lessons to help us adapt to the idiosyncrasies of our childhood environment, but then they don't serve us as adults. But our brains form based on those lessons. The neural networks that we all carry are based on those lessons, and that's why we can get stuck in those patterns. And so I like to say that a lot of neurodivergent, as you refer to, a lot of the development of our brain that then causes us to be maybe hypervigilant as an adult, which triggers the stress response, is because those are the lessons we learned as a child. And our brains literally develop based on that. So some of the reasons why there's such a huge amount of what people are labeling attention deficit has to do with the lessons of childhood, has to do with how information is bombarded to us, so that the information is designed to have us look over here, have us look over there, have us look here, to buy this product, to buy that product. But what it's doing at the same time is it's training our nervous system to have difficulties staying present with any one thing, because we get so conditioned to being pulled over here and then pulled over there. And our brains develop based on that. And so one of the most important aspects about resilience is realizing that a key to resilience is having a growth mindset. And this is related to my fifth pillar of resilience: mental balance and mastery. So that when you notice a shortcoming, you don't just go, oh, this is who I am. And you don't go, okay, doctor, give me a pill for this shortcoming or this symptom that I have. Instead, you say, what can I do to help develop myself more along this dimension so that it no longer is a shortcoming? So how do I challenge myself to grow, to get better at this? And that's how we become more resilient. We take the challenge. We recognize that whatever we see is lacking in us, there are things we could do to learn to get better. And that's a big key to resilience.
Okay, so there's 9 pillars. I'm not going to make you go into each pillar, but I do want to know, what are some things you can do without giving away the book? I told you I'm going to give away the whole book, and then nobody will buy it. And then I'm joking. So tell me some things that you can do.
Okay. So first off,
what's something I could do?
Yeah. So first off, it's important to realize that, my purpose in writing my book was not just to give good information. My goal in writing the book was to get results, for people reading it to actually take action based on the lessons of the book, so that their lives change. Okay. And so it would be impossible for me to just give all the information for the book, because a person needs to sit with that book and say, okay, today I'm going to take these steps that Dr. Sideroff recommends so that I grow my ability along this dimension of resilience or that dimension. So let's start with my first pillar, which is our relationship with ourself. Think about that, everybody listening and watching right now. What am I referring to? Well, if you're about to do something and you hear your internal voice say, I'm not sure you're going to get it right, or, you have a tendency to make a mistake, or some other form of judgment or negativity. That's the internal voice that you've developed through your childhood. Again, what I said earlier is that we learn those lessons well. So if a mother or a father berates you or says you're not doing it right, or they're continually judging you, that's how you learn to treat yourself. Okay. So my first pillar, relationship with yourself, means, number one, to start paying attention to how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself. Most of us can be judgmental and negative. These are not qualities that result in a resilient person. What are the qualities? And so I like to say that a healthy internal parent, which would be the goal, which would be the model, a healthy internal parent comes from a place of love, compassion, acceptance, support, self-care, and joy. So that's the model. So in terms of tips for your audience, the very first one is to start noticing your self-talk. Start noticing how you treat yourself. Okay? If you make a mistake, how do you deal with that? Are you hard on yourself? Do you put yourself down? Do you say, oh, of course, that's who you are? All of those responses are hurtful, undermining responses. And here's where the growth mindset comes in, because the way you talk to yourself is not part of your genetics. You're not born with that. You learn it. And just as you've learned it, you can unlearn it and learn something better that serves you better. And that's the qualities, incorporating the qualities of a healthy internal parent. So that's a very important first message to your audience, is to notice how you are treating yourself, and then be aware of the model of a healthy internal voice that you want to strive to incorporating into how you talk to yourself.
That is definitely something I personally struggle with. I catch myself beating myself up all the time, like talking to myself, saying negative things about my appearance, saying negative things about, anything on a given day. So it's like obviously a practice that you have to wake up in the morning, I'm assuming, and say something positive about yourself and catch yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, you want to start off that way. You want to establish what I refer to as affirmations. An affirmation is an as-if statement, as if you already have achieved it. So an affirmation might be, I talk to myself from a place of love and acceptance. An affirmation may be, I no longer put myself down. I no longer make judgments about myself. And you repeat those affirmations throughout the day, and your brain hears them, and your brain begins to start believing those things that you're saying as affirmations, as intentions for how you want to make changes in your life.
Do you have cases of people, like I know you're a doctor, so you've researched this, and your resume is very impressive. But is this something that you obviously use and practice yourself? Because I can tell from my beginning story where I talked about the bike and being paranoid, and you brought up living in the moment. So you practice this yourself, but do you also have patients or people that you've, like kind of trained on this method before you wrote the book? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, this is something that I've been using and incorporating into my clinical work for many years now, and keep honing it and getting it more and more effective. But the key is, how do I now get other people to follow through? So, I could think of like one woman client of mine who was hard on herself. And she would justify being hard on herself by saying, isn't this the way for me to get to wake myself up, to make sure I do it right by being hard on myself? Isn't that, by sort of beating myself, that I'll want to do better so that I stop beating myself? And I said to her, no, it doesn't work that way. When you're hard on yourself, when you beat yourself up, when you are judgmental or critical, you're basically telling yourself you're not okay. And when you give yourself that message, it has many harmful consequences. It could result in you not feeling you deserve good things or to be better. It could have you question any effort that you make, because you're starting off with this kind of belief that you're not okay. And so it debunks this notion of negativity, critical, judgmental. But what I had her do is, I had her take that voice and put it outside of herself and have it speak. So she heard it over there, not over here within herself. That's a very important step. Here, it's something separate from you. You can separate it out. Mm-hmm. Now, what you need to do is say no to it. Now you need to stand up to it. Well, we can't just stand up to a no. We have to find something to replace it with. And that's the healthy internal parent that I just gave you the qualities of. So then I had her actually have dialogue between her existing voice that always finds fault with the positive, loving voice that we're working to incorporate. And now she gets to actually have a dialogue between these two voices. When the negative voice is so powerful and is inside of you, it doesn't leave room for anything else. So now I separate these out. So now we have an opportunity to keep hearing from the positive voice. We keep hearing that message. And little by little, she was able to begin standing up to the negative voice. At first, it was a defensive standing up, where the positive would come up with reasons why the negative was wrong, or why I could think of positive things. But the ultimate goal, is for the positive to start being assertive with that negative voice. So at first it's defending itself, but then rather than defend, so every time that the negative comes up with some other reason to feel bad about yourself, the second part of the process is to finally say, you're not serving me. You're not helping me. I don't want to hear any of your crap anymore, because it's just harmful and I'm not going to allow that anymore. So we're developing through this process and this self-talk, and people can have this dialogue and do this same thing for themselves. It begins to create strength in the positive. It begins to create this ability to set a boundary. And that's also a very important issue in all of our lives, is setting boundaries not only to our internal negative, but setting boundaries to the negative from people who say that to us. Mm-hmm. And so all of this is our creating a healthy internal self, one that says positive things, and one that's able to set this boundary, the psychological boundary, which then creates a greater sense of safety within ourselves.
Let me ask you a question about that. So I'm going to just think of an example. I'm notorious for apologizing. I'm one of those women that apologizes for everything. Like I hit you with a grocery cart and it wasn't even me that hit you, but somebody hit me. And then I go, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And somebody once, I think, came on the podcast and said, stop apologizing. Like, don't apologize. Why are you apologizing? You didn't do it. Would that be considered something that you're talking about?
Yeah, yes, but let me ask you, why do you apologize?
Good question. I think it was my upbringing. It was my parenting. My mom always taught me to be polite. I think it's a female thing where we're taught as young girls, like, to always apologize.
Yeah, so apologizing is being deferential. It's like putting the other person ahead of yourself.
Yes.
And that's
yes.
and that's another thing that many of us do. And one of the things, for example, do you find it difficult to take in compliments?
I do. Yeah.
Many of us have difficulty taking in compliments. And part of that is because we've created such a defensive wall to not feel pain that it actually interferes with the positive as well. And so it's very important in developing a healthy sense of self that you fully appreciate all of your successes, that you fully take in all of your gifts and qualities that have helped you create the successes in your life. And so that's another thing that I will actually work with my clients to do is in our sessions, I will ask them to talk about some of their successes. And I'll say, tell me about the qualities, your qualities that made it possible for you to achieve those successes. And people are very uncomfortable doing it. They feel, I don't want to brag. If I don't want to say too much good about myself because who knows what bad will then happen. No, I'm not asking people to go out and shout to the world how good you are, but I do want people to be able to tell themselves how good they are. This is emotional nourishment, and that's another contribution to resilience.
It's so interesting because this is all learned behavior. And I'm not saying that it's like, but it does go back to being a kid. You know, either the kids at school say, like, you don't want to brag, or, my poor mom's getting beaten up right now, but just like, be polite, do the right thing. Don't brag, don't talk about yourself, saying this or that. And so that's a learned behavior. And I know that I struggle with that because if anytime somebody says to me, like, oh, you look, I like your dress or whatever, I deflect it into something else, or I make a joke. With me, especially, I've told you, I like to joke. Yeah. I don't know if that's a protective mechanism. It is, actually. I do know that about myself. But it's also like I want to make other people comfortable. I always want to make people comfortable around me.
So we all learn lessons as a child. And the first thing I want to say about these lessons is that we did a good job. We learned them well. And they served us to get through childhood. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong in that. And that's important for people to know and to get. You didn't make any mistakes to get to where you got to today. You learned those lessons, and you needed to learn those lessons to help you get through childhood. However, they're not the best lessons as an adult. And so we can appreciate how well we did that, but now we need to start noticing, and you're doing a great job of it and reporting them to me, noticing some of these ways that we learned as a child that are not serving us now. I refer to those as our primitive Gestalt patterns. Primitive Gestalt patterns. And I ask people to begin stalking their pattern, to begin noticing, like noticing the negative self-talk or noticing the differential nature we are with other people, noticing all of these patterns, lessons from childhood that are now getting in our way. And so these patterns have a tremendous, what I refer to as a gravitational pull, a power to them. And this is why change is so difficult. But the good news is that juxtaposed to the power of our childhood patterns, which is embedded in the lessons and the neural network of our brain, we have this tremendous ability of neuroplasticity. And that simply means that our brains are capable of new learning, they're capable of change. But we need to be consistent with it. We need to be focused on those changes and stay with it. And that's difficult for many people, most people, to do. We see that, oh my goodness, that goal is so far down the road. How am I ever going to get there, right? And that's why books on the subject, people will read the first chapter and then that's it. But again, when I wrote my book, I was writing it to get results. And one of the things that was key is I have to give people a sense of hope, a sense of it's possible, a belief that they can achieve this. And so one of the ways I did this was establishing a construct that I refer to as the path. Okay? And the path is something that's right here, right alongside us all the time. And if you follow just a few steps from the lessons of my book, that puts you onto the path. And you can take those steps and get onto the path right here, right now. And it will take you in the right direction. So we don't have to wait days, years, months until we get to this place of resilience. Instead, we have this notion of the path that's right here today, right now. Go to the book, take a few steps based on the lessons of the book that puts you on the path. And that's the best you can do. You're golden. I'm on the path. And so it's a way for people to feel like success is more doable. And if I fall off the path, then I take a few steps based on the book to get back onto the path. And anytime we can ask ourselves one question: am I on or off the path? And if I'm off the path, I take these steps to get back onto the path.
So it's never too late to get back. It almost sounds like to me, because people are creatures of habit. I know I am, right? I always want the easy way out. I don't want to sit through a yoga class. That sounds like torture to me. I sit and stare at the clock. Or I don't want to meditate. I don't want to do it, even though I know it's going to help me, but I don't want to take the time to do it. I don't want to take the time to change. I want the easy route. Or if you're on a diet, you might be on the diet for a week, and then you go, okay, I'm going to go right back to what I was eating before and wonder why I gained the weight back. Right? Don't you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. That's how many of us get stuck.
Yeah.
Is we want the quick fix. And that's why the whole medical, pharmaceutical professions are based on that. Take a pill instead of maybe practicing yoga, practicing meditation, so we're talking about the ability to self-regulate. We're talking about the ability to be in a place of balance. We stress, we throw our bodies out of balance. We need to find some way, some relaxation, meditation to recover the resources used up in that stress. to keep our nervous system in a place of balance between the activation and the recovery. And we go to the doctor because our blood pressure is elevated. And does the doctor, we would want the doctor to say, okay, your nervous system is dysregulated. You're spending too much time engaged in stressful behavior, and you're not taking any time to recover from it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you a prescription for a meditation class. I'm going to give you a prescription for a yoga class, something that will help guide your body into a better place of balance. Instead, they say, let's wait and let's observe, and if it keeps going up, we'll give you medication. Do they say, tell me about your diet? Tell me, maybe you have too much sugar, processed food in your diet. Let's take a look at that. Resilience is about what I can do to help myself slow my aging and increase my vitality. It's all within my power. Now, one of the reasons, and back to what you were talking about, difficulty yoga, meditating, one of the reasons we have difficulty is because of our judgments, our self-judgments. Oh, I'm not doing this well. I'm not doing it good enough. And now I'm going to avoid this because I have all these self-judgments about it. If instead I say, however I do it, it's okay. And then when I do it, I go, oh, I'm more present. I'm not up in my head worrying if I'm doing it right or not, or fast enough. Now I'm more present with it because I'm not making the judgments. I'm more accepting of myself. And you know what? It actually feels good to focus on my breath. It actually feels good to follow how my body feels sitting in this chair. So if we get out of our own way by letting go of some of the way we judge ourselves, that helps us be in the present moment. And presence is my 7th pillar of resilience, by the way, how well we are present, noticing what's in our environment. The more we're accepting of ourselves, the easier we can be in the moment. If we're not judging whether we're doing it right or not, it allows us to notice what's actually happening. And now, look at this beautiful world that I'm able to experience better because I'm here in this moment. I'm not up in my head worrying about what's going to happen later today.
This is such a hard thing to do, but I know you're right. And I know that this is all accurate. I mean, you touched on the aging and the vitality. So as a culture, I'm just going to talk about our country, and my listeners are all over the world. So thank you if you're tuning in. I'm sure in other cultures, they deal with the same stress and, but in the United States, it's like, go, 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 go. It's a money-based, like, what do you have culture, always looking for the next thing. And right now there's so much turmoil in our country. I mean, it's hard to just even sometimes want to roll out of bed, I'm afraid. But I think the point that I would like to ask you about is the aging process and how this all connects. So if you're going to spend, I'm in the middle of my life, hopefully I still have years to go. I don't want to spend the rest of my life putting myself down. I don't want to keep talking to myself the way that I do. I'm notorious for it. So I really am at the point where I'm like, I know I need to change. I know I need to stop being so angry. I need to stop beating myself up. I need to get over, things that are pushing me down. I need to meditate. I just had this conversation yesterday. And if it takes me doing 1 minute a day to start and then building that, that's fine. But my long-winded question is, if we don't do these things that you're talking about, this is how people develop disease and they don't have the longevity. Am I correct? Can you kind of touch on that?
The problems are physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. We have a growing amount of chronic illness in our country. The curve goes like this: chronic illness. For the first time in the history of recorded science, our life expectancy has just taken a drop for the first time. I will say that all of this is stress related. And I don't think it really helps us to say, well, the other people are suffering just as much as I am, right? I want to not be suffering. And so we're talking about, yes, literally slowing the aging process. Research has now demonstrated that stress speeds up aging. Mm-hmm. And what's the biggest source of any illness? Aging. Aging is the biggest cause of any kind of illness. So if stress is speeding up aging, it's speeding us closer to the time we're going to have one or another type of illness. Stress has tremendous impact on our physical state, our emotional state, but also how our brains function, how we think. So under stress, we make poorer decisions because we have less access to the most important cortex and prefrontal cortex parts of our brain. Under stress, the blood in our brains tends to shift down to the more primitive survival centers of the brain. And we go into more stereotypic behavior, less creative. A lot of people find they have cognitive fog. And so stress impacts all of these things. But let's talk about the converse. Resilience facilitates all of these things. Resilience helps us stay healthy. Resilience will result in what I refer to as a greater health span. As opposed to lifespan, health span is how long you live with optimal function before you die. So we want to have our optimal function like this as close to where we die as possible. But what happens in our society is we got this kind of a curve where our functioning begins to decrease really at 30, 40, 50 years of age. Okay? But again, it means people saying, I'm not going to stand for this anymore. I'm not going to do things as usual. I'm going to start doing things to take better care of myself. And that's where, for example, my book comes in, because it's not that easy. There are different things you have to follow and do. And again, when people read my book, people say, what I love about your book is you seem to speak directly to me. You seem to know exactly what I was dealing with. And then you give the solutions even before I start to have my resistance to them. So that's how I designed my book. I designed my book to make it as easy as possible for people to follow, making changes in their lives. This is about change, transformation, and change is difficult for all the reasons that we've been talking about.
I think that it's something, though, that sounds like people can do it. I mean, that's the most important thing is I think a lot of people live in their heads and they don't want it. They want to make changes, but they just don't know how, and that's one of the biggest issues for people is they're like, and also like all the things like social media, which that's a whole separate episode, but just the noise that we constantly are surrounded by. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, do you tell people like stay away from the stimulation? Like, can you touch on that? Is that in the book?
Yes, it is. It is. So yeah, the difficulties are, number one, people don't know how to do it. And then number two, when they think of all the things they need to do, they feel overwhelmed. And that's why, in my approach, I say, here today, just take these couple of steps and that puts you on the path. That's rewarding. That feels good. Oh, I did it. Today I was on the path. Oh, great. Let me be on the path tomorrow as well. But we're bombarded by stresses all the time. And we're bombarded by information that's really usually not good for us. So again, it's taking your life into your own hands rather than just being a victim of what the world is handing you.
Mm-hmm.
Begin to make discriminations. Begin to say no to stuff that's negative. Begin to say yes to the things that are more positive and life affirming. So start making the discriminations. We are a product of our environment. We're impacted by everything in our environment. But I'm inviting people to start discriminating as to what you allow into your psychological space. And you have a choice. Everybody who's watching this, you have a choice. I tell people, limit how much news you take in. You want to be aware and informed of what's going on in the world, but you don't want to keep hearing the same message over and over again. And the other thing I really highly recommend is make sure you're getting your news and information from a reliable source.
Mm-hmm.
These days, there's so much misinformation. And in fact, there are many radio, TV stations that thrive on giving misinformation. You don't have to accept that. You don't have to settle for that. And in fact, it's your responsibility what goes into your head, into your brain. And you want to make sure it's the best quality information. So one of the lessons here that we're talking about, Meghan, is all the ways that a person can feel more and more in control of their life. When we feel more in control of our life, we feel less stressed.
It's so true. And I touch on that often, if I'm on social media, which I am for the podcast. I have a podcast Instagram. I posted some misinformation. I talked about this, I think, last episode. Somebody sent me something and I reposted it and they said, don't, why are you posting that? It's not accurate. It's from 2018. We have to be so careful about what and we have to hold ourselves accountable too for what we're posting as people with accurate information. I watch a lot of news and my husband gets mad at me because I spend every morning watching the news. And I know that I shouldn't be doing that. So I will tell you, I 100% agree with that because it starts my morning in a negative space.
So let me ask you a question. You just said, I listen to a lot of news and I know I shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. So why are you doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing?
Well, I also know I shouldn't be shopping so much. I also know, I'm a creature of, I don't know what it is. I think it goes back to my early childhood, right? What you touched on earlier.
So again, I'm suggesting to you, your audience, and everybody that if you notice a discrepancy that you're living by, that you keep it out in front of yourself so that you're not ignoring the discrepancy. So you stay present with the discrepancy because this is about personal integrity. If I have a belief, I want to follow that belief. If I have a belief and I'm following some other plan, if I know that it's better to limit myself to, say, a half hour of news each day, and I'm listening to 2 hours, okay, what's going on with myself here? Why am I not doing what's in my own best interest? And don't let go of that question until you get resolution with it.
I mean, I you know what? I'm going to tell you right now, I'm listening to you, and I think that's a start that I'm going to start tomorrow. because,
Great.
and guess what? I'm on the path, right? I'm
Yes,
starting the path already. So
that's right.
I want to ask you kind of in closing. So there's 9 pillars, and
Yes.
we didn't discuss all 9, but in like kind of our closing period, is there like a key point that you can tell my listeners and myself? So, I'm obviously going to go out and read the book. I'm excited. This is exactly up my alley, and I'm so excited to have you on and that you came on and talked about this. But can you touch on like one key point if we haven't already?
Well, so just to review, we talked about your relationship with yourself. We've touched on relationship with others in how you want to discriminate information that comes in. Pillar 3 is your relationship with something greater, and that could be spirituality. It could be having meaning and purpose in your life. Very important. It can be giving service, something that connects you to the larger community. We've talked about physical balance and mastery, which is recovery after stressful experiences and finding some form of relaxation for you to be training your nervous system into a place of calm in contrast to stress, which keeps activating it. We've talked about mental balance and mastery, a growth mindset, focusing on the positive. The 6th pillar is emotional balance and mastery. Here's another key. A lot of times we're emotionally reactive to things that are going on. That's because what's going on is tapping into our unfinished emotional business, feelings we've been carrying, excess baggage. Those need to be worked through so that you let go of them and you're not carrying upsets with you. That should be a goal for everybody. No regrets in life. Work through any regrets. We talked about presence, the 7th pillar. The 8th pillar is flexibility. This is about making adjustments in your day and your life to get your needs met. Sometimes if you're going for a goal, there's an obstacle there. Don't be stubborn. Be flexible and shift your goal, shift your path to have greater success. Flexibility is also being able to put yourself into someone else's shoes so you can see a different perspective. And then finally, my 9th pillar is power, which I define as the ability to get things done. And that's about having courage to overcome your fear, being persistent, being positive, setting goals, and being focused. And again, the notion of a growth mindset means that wherever you find an inadequacy or what you label as an inadequacy or shortcoming, that should be noticed as an opportunity for growth.
Wow. I mean, you've sold me. I'm getting the book. I'm excited to read it. Everyone, I mean, I can't imagine you didn't listen to this episode today and really like kind of take take a look at your own life. I know like these are all things that I really want to do. And what I love about this is I'm assuming this is a book that you can put down, read it, and then always come back to it. So it's a practice,
yes.
Correct?
It's a book where I tell people read 5 or 10 minutes each day and pick out one concept that you then follow throughout that whole day. So that's one of the ways, methodologies of using my book. But again, the idea behind my book is to help people, support people to stay with the process. And if you break away from it, how to quickly and easily get back onto it. Right now, I've been doing a 10-day resilience challenge. And each day I've been giving some information about each of the pillars. If people go to my website, drstephensideroff.com, I have the recordings of all those 10 resilience challenge days that they can listen to.
Well, I am so honored to have you on. Where can people get the book? Is it out yet? I don't think it's out yet, right?
So the book will be released on June 4th, but they can get a pre-publication copy. And in fact, again, going to my website, I have a very special deal right now. For people who pre-order my book, they will receive my 6-week audio resilience plus guidebook program that I sell on my website alone for $47. And they'll get that free if they purchase my book right now.
Okay, well, I am excited to start this. Thank you, by the way. We both love Janice Klein. She sent you to me, and I'm so honored that I got to meet you today. And it was exactly actually what I needed. I really did. I feel like I met you at the exact moment I was supposed to. I talk about that a lot. And I love what you're doing, and I just think you're amazing. So again, everyone, in closing, thank you again, Dr. Sideroff. It's really nice to meet you today. And everyone, get on the path. I know I'm going to get on the path because I need it.
And I'm going to and I'd love you to let me know how it comes out.
Oh, don't worry. You're stuck with me. I love my guests, and they're stuck with me after they meet me, and then they're probably like, leave me alone, Meghan. Anyways, everyone, in closing, keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Thank you again.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.